Bizarre Reality Media.
Indiana County 911. My brother's gone. Can you be a little more specific, sir? He took my brother. Who took him? I don't know who took him. I don't know what. Sir, take a breath. Explain to me what happened.
And I looked out and there was this big red blinking UFO.
I can just say this. Something's going on in the woods. Something's going on.
They're not dogs, they're not coyotes. What could it be, right?
I had an encounter with a skunk ape, and it completely altered the course of my life.
I found a skull. I think you guys are going to want to come film this.
Put him out.
I just see it.
Sightings of a UFO hovering over a barn.
Millie woke up from a dream, and when I went into the bedroom, she said there's a monster on the wall.
They saw that the creature had run through a barbed wire fence. They were able to obtain hairs. They sent the hairs to their lab, and it came back as an unknown creature.
Bizarre Encounters with Shayn Orin.
What is up, Bizarre Society and Bizarrites? I am the one that some refer to as Shane, aka the original Shane Squatch.
I will give you a show like you have never, ever seen before.
And alongside me, as usual, I have the big bad Boo Daddy himself, Sir Orin Felix.
Stand back, there's a hurricane coming through. Ooh, yeah.
Welcome to the show, man.
Thank you. So what kind of show are we talking about here that you're going to give the people?
Well, apparently we're going to get into some WrestleMania stuff today because I loaded it up fully with that. And may I also make a comment and say that our theme song is very, very long. And if we ever go back to the drawing board with that, we need to shorten that by about 30 seconds.
Yeah, there's definitely some fat that can be trimmed there. But hey, when I'm listening back to the episodes, I normally just fast forward through it anyway. So.
But I want people to want to stick around and want to really enjoy it. And I feel like that perfect window is 30 seconds. Bizarre Inquiries. I can get down with that. It seems like it's quick. We kind of dance around for a second. But yeah, start up the Bizarre Encounters one. It's just wow, that is really long.
Well, I mean, I guess once people listen to that intro, they kind of know what kind of rambling, long-winded bullshit they're in store for. So, I mean, it's a good little appetizer, I suppose.
That's the new theme song. We're just going to take some of our rants and turn it into a theme song. And the theme song itself is just going to be about 35 minutes. And then we're only going to have to do about 30-minute episodes beyond that.
That should definitely help with listeners and viewership.
We can just keep building it up until eventually it's a full episode, and then we'll be done recording. That's our exit plan.
We're just done after that?
We're just done once it's a full hour.
Okay. Well, in other exciting news, our next episode of Bizarre Inquiries, our YouTube live show, will be tomorrow after this episode drops. It'll be April 2nd. That's a Thursday. 7:15 Eastern Time on the Bizarre Reality Media YouTube channel. You guys, as always, be sure to submit questions, articles, anything like that you want us to inquire about. You can also join us in the chat during the episode, and if anyone is interested in being a guest on the show, sharing their experiences, or getting up with us basically just for any reason, Shane, how can they do that?
You guys can first and foremost email us at bizarreencounters@outlook.com, or you guys could always call or text the Bizarre Reality Media hotline 24/7, and that number is 313-364-1551. And for any professional inquiries, you guys can email us at bizarrerealitymedia@outlook.com. And if you happen to miss any of that, it is all available down in the show description.
Are you going to do the number?
I did.
Did you?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I missed it.
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll just kick it back to you, and then we can just cut this part out.
I'm going to leave it in just because you said that.
All right. No, I was looking at the article, and I zoned out for a minute. Okay. All right, guys. So on tonight's episode, Shane has an article that he's brought for us, and it's going to kind of be in the same vein of some of the subjects we've been talking about recently and some of the stuff that Shane's been sharing with us. So without further ado, Shane, why don't you tell everybody what we got going on tonight?
Well, first, I want to get into a little bit of a backstory about this. So originally, I wanted to put this together as a full episode for you guys, but I ended up having an issue where my power went out for 3 days because of high winds. So the weekend that I was going to work on this, I was not able to. So I ended up coming across this wonderful article in the process of that the following week. And when I went to show Orin it, he said, hey, why go back over it if it's already written so well and it has a bunch of pictures and everything already? So I want to give credit where credit's due, of course. This article was written by somebody named Jessica Jane Poirier at astralalchemy.com. We'll be diving into Saturn worship and the cult of the Black Cube today. And before we get too far into this, I want to first get your interpretation on what have you kind of like picked up about like this whole like black cube concept, because it seems to be this like really, really mysterious thing that everybody has different ideas of. So before we like really get into it, I'm kind of curious what your like starting initial idea is on this.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard a bit about this, just on social media and podcasts and whatnot. And basically, my understanding is the general idea behind this concept is that, like, in kind of occult and magical circles, this idea of like Saturn and the Black Cube, like a lot of these elites and occult practitioners and whatnot kind of worship this idea of Saturn or the Black Cube. And it manifests in all sorts of different ways, being like the Kaaba, like the thing in Mecca, like that's supposed to be the meteorite that, all the Muslims pray to or whatever. And so basically, like, my understanding is this is a kind of like below the surface, puppet masters pulling strings type explanation for a lot of things that are going on with, like the Illuminati and elites and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's like with a lot of occult things, it's something that's hidden under so many different layers of symbolism that it becomes this like extremely obscure, like dark concept. And when you really start like breaking it down, like it doesn't seem like as dark as what it's portrayed to be, which I'm sure is part of the idea, is that push people away from this knowledge by making it seem like it's something way darker than what it is. But with the continuation, of course, with Ari coming on last week, we unintentionally kind of got into it where he was, before we got into Tartaria, originally talking about the whole thing with like, what was the name? Electric universe theory, where it was talking about like Saturn and how it would like devour the other planetary bodies and everything. So if anybody hasn't listened to that episode, I definitely recommend going back and listening to the beginning of that, because Ari explains it extremely well. And it definitely plays into this concept, which also makes it that much more fascinating, that if these ancient occult concepts play into stuff like, electric universe theory, and that was something that was like kind of talked about, and then all of a sudden one time they're just like, all right, we're done talking about this. It kind of adds more layers of possibility to the idea of that, or at least in my idea.
Yeah, I mean, like we said, I think there's a whole lot to unpack here. I think it's very far reaching. I think it's going to touch on a lot of things that we've talked about on the show, and I think it's probably going to touch on things that, I'm not as familiar with the material as you are, but I'm sure it's going to touch on things that I don't even realize it's going to. So definitely excited to get into this one and unpack some of this.
Well, without further ado, we will hop into this article. And for anybody that's listening on audio, there is a lot of video or pictures that are involved with this article. So if you guys want, you guys can go and check it out on the YouTube. I'll make sure I upload the video up over there so you guys can check it out and get all the full pictures. But it's a rather long article with a lot of pictures, so I want to make sure that we get into it, and we definitely have enough time. So an expose of the darker aspects of Saturn and how to overcome their influences both within and without. So hopping in, the symbol of the Black Cube can be found all throughout the world, in important religious sites, rituals, and even in major cities, corporate-owned centers, business names, and logos. This symbol is associated with Saturn, linked to concepts of time, order, structure, and limitation. While often perceived as emblematic of discipline or organization, a hidden, occult, and inverted influence exists, casting an insidious shadow that may remain oblivious, to which leads one to the bondage to a system of slavery of the soul under the rule of what some have called the cult of the Black Cube. And of course, here's a bunch of pictures, as you were kind of referring to a little bit earlier about, the place in Mecca. The whole idea, I think I was talking to you about it last week, that if you look at the Star of David with the right context, it's definitely possible that you could portray a black cube in the center of that. I think we were talking about it last week too with Ari, that if you take the cross too, you can also turn that into a cube, which also is kind of a different weird concept if you really think about it. But the further we get into this, maybe the context of that will fit a bit more, but the symbolism is definitely all over the world. So
before we jump back in, just a quick question for you, Shayn. I know not so long ago you had Brandon Kroll on Inquiries. Did you guys talk about any of these type subjects? Because I feel like I've heard him post and talk about stuff like this quite a bit.
Ironically, all the main things that he normally talks about, I don't even think we ended up getting into at all in the show. We kind of just ended up getting into like a rant about like society with each other. And it wasn't so much that we even like ended up really like hitting hard on these topics. So honestly, I'm kind of tempted to have him back on Inquiries at some point. I mean, even if it's contradictory ideas to like maybe what we kind of have as a belief for some of this stuff. I guess we'll kind of see as we go a bit through, but I'm definitely curious about some of his philosophy since he's already been a guest on the show. I'm sure I could probably get him to return for some of it.
Yeah, super interesting guy. I was just curious, just popped into my head, but continue.
I mean, also just to throw it in with that, I mean, I can cut this out afterwards if I need to, but is this somebody that you might be interested in having on Bizarre Encounters? Because I could definitely set that up at some point if you wanted to too.
For sure.
Okay, yeah, for sure.
I'd definitely be down to talk to him.
All right, well, hopping back in then. Although Saturn is named after the Roman god, its influence as an archon or planetary ruler of our sphere can be found throughout many different mythologies and religions as the same in essence, regardless of its many different forms or names. Unraveling the mysteries surrounding the symbolic connection provides a gateway to understanding the deeper, often veiled forces at play in both the metaphysical and tangible realms. And the planet Saturn, of course, there's a picture of it. Saturn is the sixth planet from the sun, the furthest planet that can be seen by the naked eye, and as the furthest luminary from the Earth. Binds our solar system from a geometric perspective and in ancient cosmology as seen as a boundary that keeps the lower realms of our solar system separate from the celestial and stellar influences of the higher realms. It is the planet associated with restriction, limitation, and separation. And there is definitely a lot more context on that, breaking it down with electric universe theory, if anybody wants to go back and listen to that episode with Ari. But moving on past that, in astrology, Saturn is traditionally associated with structure, space-time, order, law, discipline, responsibility, limitations, restrictions, borders, oaths that bind, and authority. It is often seen as a symbol of hard work, perseverance, and the consequences of one's actions. Saturn's influence is said to bring about lessons, challenges, and opportunities for growth throughout overcoming obstacles. And of course, they have a picture of the Saturn map down over here. Interestingly, modern astrology confirms further associations with binding and limitations which echo this ancient knowledge of the stargazers and astrologers. Saturn is infamously known to be bonded by its many rings, and as its further luminaries thus bonds our solar system from a geocentric point of view. Even in the quantum realms of modern physics, Saturn shows up as the planet's constant, the limitation of space-time geometry itself. The symbol for the reduced Planck's constant, pronounced H-bar, is the same symbol used for Saturn in both ancient astrology, alchemical, and modern astrological traditions. The value of, I'm not even going to get into that number, but if people are watching on screen, they can definitely look at that long-ass number, of course, represent the constant of space-time geometry. And of course, here are the two symbols that were being referenced above. Modern scientific and astrological observations have confirmed that there is a hexagonal storm on the North Pole of Saturn, and that's definitely something that you hear a lot of different people talk about with the six-sided octagon on the top of Saturn. And if anybody hasn't already seen that storm, there's a picture of it. The hexagon, related to the hexagram symbol, forms a cube which the lines are connected. I had not actually thought about it that way, but yeah, that's definitely one way to interpret that. According to the ancient and traditional astrological tradition, Saturn is sad, morose, and cold, and was said to govern the melancholy humor. Saturn is considered the greater malefic in almost all astrological and alchemical traditions, and is typically associated with the color black, death, constraints, and limitations, space-time, and is often represented by the cube. And also, again, going into what Ari was talking about, which I think it'll get covered a little bit farther into this, but the whole idea with Saturn, of course, was that nothing made it past it because they would get devoured essentially by Saturn's like pull. And if you're thinking about it from that perspective with electric universe theory, the fact that it's a giant gaseous body would almost kind of make sense that it would be the thing that would like consume and destroy these things. And I think Ari again broke it down a lot better, but he was also kind of mentioning, I believe, that like the gaseous body of Saturn also helped somewhat to form the planets. If I'm not mistaken, do you remember that or not?
Yeah, there was something to that effect, but Ari just knows so much information, and I feel like I couldn't keep up with everything he was saying. So yeah, I might have to go back and listen to at least the beginning of that episode after we do this, just to kind of put some pieces together.
But yeah, that was like the whole symbology though, with the whole thing about like Saturn eating its children, was the fact that it like created them and then it later on ended up devouring them. And if you get into, again, the whole like symbology of electric universe theory, that's essentially what they're trying to describe, but through, mythological type stories. But just something fascinating to think about, of course, because it seems like, again, the more you dive into the occult, the more it doesn't seem like these like crazy mythological stories, but again, trying to be interpretations of things in the best language that they could possibly use. And I feel like a lot of the problem with a lot of this occult stuff, and when you dive into it, is, you know, there's 10 different ways to interpret a lot of this stuff. And a lot of people take it extremely literally, and they think that they're conducting black magic, when I think I mentioned this on a previous episode, that I think a lot of these rituals aren't necessarily like rituals in the sense that people think they are, like they're conducting something, but rather that they might be visual interpretations of a process to do some type of chemical, whatever it is, whether it's like opening something, conducting something. So I think a lot of people have spent generations doing these rituals thinking that it's like literally opening the gate, when it's actually like the key on like how to open the gate, because they couldn't fully describe it through text. So they instead showed the movement of these different particles or these
like
different
performance
things.
art almost.
Yeah, exactly. That's honestly what I think a lot of these rituals break down to, is they were trying to describe things with moving pieces almost, instead of just putting it down in text.
No, that's a really interesting thought. So, you want me to jump into this next section here?
Yeah, we can go back and forth on sections if you want. I definitely appreciate it. As I was mentioning, and I'm sure I'll cut it out in the show in the post, I had a bunch of phlegm falling in the front of my face, so I kept getting choked up while I was trying to read. So
we don't want you getting phlegmy and choked up. So all right, so
gotta love Michigan weather.
Is called Saturn. Hang on, let me get to it. Saturnian symbolism of the cube. The cube of space is intricately tied to Saturn, representing the matrix of matter, structure, and earthly foundations. In the realm of Platonic solids, the cube specifically corresponds to the earth element, embodying stability and the material manifestation. The cube further extends to concepts associated with the Kabbalistic cube of space and Metatron's cube, a sacred geometric figure composed of multiple interconnected cubes, symbolizing the interconnectedness of the divine and the material world. Metatron's cube incorporates the cube's foundational symbolism, emphasizing its role in shaping the structure of reality and highlighting the profound link between geometry, Saturnian influences, and the tangible aspects of existence.
Just to throw this in as a weird concept, and hopefully I'm not jumping too far ahead of myself with some of the stuff and some of the information, because like I said, I've been doing some research on this behind the scenes too, regardless, but Metatron's cube, that whole concept, the whole thing behind Metatron was he was one of those people that didn't like die. He just like left. Are you familiar somewhat with like the background of like Metatron?
Not really.
Yeah, he basically just like was chosen by God and essentially just like left like reality. I don't know how else to explain it. So if you get into like this whole like Metatron's cube idea, and you get into the whole idea, I guess later on maybe we'll get into it about what the black cube is exactly. The whole Metatron's cube geometric equation idea could be something that links into like escaping the Matrix almost. Like maybe we'll touch back on that a little bit later, but just something to think about.
Okay. All right. So jumping back in, the article says, the structure of space and the formation of matter, the matrix, is the feminine aspect of Saturn, associated with the Binah. I guess is how. Do you know how that's pronounced? Binah.
Binah. Yeah.
Yeah. In Hermetic Kabbalah, and the mother. This in itself has no inherent negative implications, yet has been corrupted by the more negative and malefic aspects of the Saturnian influences that will be discussed below. Saturn, associated with limitation, restriction, and constraint, resonates with the cube's geometric precision, but there is a negative aspect to this. This more obscured facet of Saturn's influence leads to the very repression, of the more positive and nurturing feminine aspects of it. This is what leads to the binding to the cult of the black cube, which harbors a dark aspect, leading individuals into unwitting bondage under a systematic structure of slavery.
And this is where we're starting to really get into the concepts of the black cube and what it actually is and what reality is exactly with the black cube. But we apologize, guys, for the interference, but we will be right back. And now back to the show. Hopping a little bit further before we get back into that whole Metatron's cube concept, the energetic aspects of the cube, entrapment and imprisonment. Cubic structures have been used as symbols to imprison, limit, or trap energy. And I'm already going to throw this one in here because I think we were talking about it on a recent episode, talking about Trey Hudson with, the whole idea about like cubes being like a prison or like a trap. I think it was him that brought it up as a theory, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah, I think when we were talking about like the whole Meadow project and the cubes they encountered.
Yeah, and so if you start getting into this whole aspect of the cubes, and you start getting into this whole aspect of, like, for lack of a better term, these like interdimensional beings, or these like beings that are coming from another reality that we're talking about, you know, again, this is such like a big concept, but essentially like the whole idea about like being trapped in a cube seems like it's like a cube inside of a cube, because reality is supposed to essentially be a black cube itself. So the whole idea about trapping people in a cube inside of a black cube almost doesn't seem like a far off concept once you really like get into the concept of what the black cube is. You know, it's just basically like a smaller version of itself within itself.
That's trippy, man.
Right?
It's a conspiracy, man.
There you go.
The 90-degree square aspects in astrology is known to be the most challenging of all aspects. Can create a lot of tension, conflict, frustration, and of opposition of the characteristics between the two bodies involved. The T shape, which is the two of these squares forming a sort of corner, is the most challenging of all. Even modern box architects have been scientifically shown to create sharp interference and dissociation of energy. The influences over light and sound dynamics in a box are significant. Sharp corners can affect light distortion, creating shadowed areas. Acoustically, sharp corners and angles of a box contribute to sound reflections, causing echoes or emphasizing certain dissonant frequencies, and their flat surfaces can cause sound to further bounce around. Modern cubic or box architecture emerges in the mid-20th century as part of the new international style. Architects emphasize simplicity, functionality in the use of industrial materials. This style gained popularity in the 1950s and the 1960s, becoming a common approach to the design in residential and commercial buildings worldwide. Yet perhaps this is having a much more serious impact on the consciousness of humanity and the overall involvement of mankind that previously has been considered. Imagine what the effects of living, working, and constantly being in a box has on consciousness and vitality. Think outside the box is a familiar saying that is a clue here. Perhaps this is how one can be disconnected from the healthy, nurturing aspects of the feminine aspects of Saturn, spending time outside in nature, meditating, or cultivating the fruits of the earth, to become imprisoned by the negative aspects of a mundane level. So, kind of breaking this down into a little bit simpler of a form, the idea of the black cube is more so a philosophical concept that is essentially the whole idea of imprisoning somebody within their idea of existence. So when you start putting the symbolism everywhere, that you essentially are giving people this symbolism of being trapped within something, then they're constantly feeling like they're trapped, but they don't essentially know why they're trapped, which gets into this broader concept of the black cube, that the black cube can essentially be any system that you feel like you're trapped in, that simply all you have to do is get up and walk away from, but you feel like you're imprisoned, slavery, trapped into the system. Like a prime example of it, of course, would be like your job. You know, you feel like you're completely trapped in your job. Your job is a black box. All you have to do is get up and walk away, but you don't realize that you can do that because you're trapped inside this black box. And expanding this even further, and hopefully people don't take this negatively, but the whole idea of the symbolism of the black box within every religion. Again, seeing it possibly in the Star of David, possibly folding up the cross, all of these things. One way that religions could possibly be interpreted is a black box of the mind, because when you're thinking within a religion, like we've mentioned a few times on the show, that becomes your paradigm, that becomes your box of thought, and essentially it ends up creating this black box within your mind that you're now mentally trapped inside of. So really, really weird symbolism if you start understanding this as more of a philosophical concept rather than like a specific entity or like thing that these cults are specifically praying to. It's more so, again, like a philosophical concept or like idea more than anything.
Yeah, I think those are all interesting points. Something else I kind of wanted to throw in here, if you don't mind. I think the whole architecture angle of all this is really interesting. I mean, I'm sure you've seen on social media and whatnot, like all the posts where it'll show like an old like English phone booth or something like that, and then like a modern day phone booth, and they're like, man, we used to make things beautiful and interesting, and now everything's just boxy and ugly. And it kind of gets you thinking, like, you know, is there a reason for that? Is this to kind of, you know, dampen down people's consciousness and things of that nature? And taking it a step further and going back to some of the stuff we talked about with Ari, we always talk about the Tartarian architecture and, how are people able to build that kind of stuff, back in those times. It kind of makes me wonder if that style of architecture is just blatantly being hidden and made where we cannot reproduce it because there's some sort of power in these cube structures and this cube mentality.
I mean, and look at every representation of like corporate structures taking over. And this is something you even see in like cartoons. Like, I'm sure you watched Fairly Odd Parents back in the day, and there was the Pixies that were like the bureaucratic ones, and every single thing that was associated with them were these like boxy cube type shapes. So like this symbolism of like structure and order being associated with the cube is something that is being put into people's minds from the time that they're a child. And honestly, like, think about it when you're thinking about it like creatively, that when you're thinking about trying to create a structure for something creative, usually you're thinking of more of like a round type of structure or like an obscure type of structure. But when you're thinking visually of something that's containing order, you're thinking of like hexagons, cubes, like these square structures. So it's something that's so deeply implanted into the human psyche that I feel like it's, without you even realizing it, if you're constantly seeing cubes everywhere, you are definitely being subconsciously programmed into this like entrapment, bureaucratic, follow the rules type of concept without even realizing it. And especially when you start getting into like, again, the Tartarian aspect, that it seems like people's minds were a lot more expanded, or even bringing it back into, I think we mentioned on a previous episode, the whole Rosicrucian idea with expanding consciousness of the people. And the whole thing with like Shakespeare about trying to teach people like the common language and all this type of stuff. I feel like we go through these patches in time where it seems like we have these expansions of consciousness. And then once the expansion of consciousness gets too far from the people in control, they go, oh crap, we got a problem here. And they try to do something to dampen it back down. Because we see, again, if you watch through time, it seems like we go in these spurts of enlightenment, and then all of a sudden everybody's back into these like bureaucratic straight line rules of like falling under order, falling under hierarchy. It's like a constant back and forth where it's like, again, the light and the dark constantly battling each other for trying to elevate the consciousness of people and lower it. And not to go off on another rant, but this is something that I've been following, and maybe I'll do an episode of it on the future. But talking about the like rise of like hip hop music and what it started off with to what it is now. I listened to this recent interview with the dude from Smashing Pumpkins, and he was talking about
Billy Corgan.
Yeah, talking about this whole thing about
He's
like
a super interesting guy.
Did you see the whole thing where he was talking about like back in the 90s there was this like force at work that all of a sudden like kicked rock music out of like being like the main facet of like human. Yeah, so he gets into this.
Look it up though.
This whole idea about it. Maybe we can cover it on a future episode. But it seems like that's when the shift in consciousness happened, was in the 90s, because if you follow it back in the 60s, they were using music to try to influence the minds of the young, and it was being done through rock and roll. And what happened was, by the time rock and roll got to be like 80s, 90s, it started getting to a point where the consciousness of the people that were writing it was getting to a point where it was so expanded that it was almost like, when people get so smart that they get to a point of being depressed because they're viewing life from like a totally different perspective. Like that's what was happening with a lot of these like 80s, 90s artists. So they're writing these like really, really deep philosophical concepts and hiding it within their music. Like Black Hole Sun is like a prime example of what I'm talking about here. So I think what happened was they were like, oh shit, the consciousness is starting to get out of control here. We need to shift it. So how are we going to shift it? We got to shift it over to hip hop. And when we shift it over to hip hop, it first starts as a very intelligent type of music because they needed to bring people off of this into this. But now it's degraded into this like goofy, like if you follow the psychology of it, they basically use the same concept for writing children's music as they do for modern day hip hop, because they've degraded the culture of the mainstream of how people think back down. Because I think we keep going into these shifts, because hip hop was starting to get to a point of being smart, and now they started to shift it and tank it, and now it's starting to push back into like pop music again. So it seems like there's this constant influence of like people breaking out of this like hive mind cube concept, and then as soon as they're able to start doing that, they got to put them back inside of this cube again. Sorry, long rant, but hopefully all that made sense.
And I wonder what direction we're moving in now.
Wonder.
All right, so jumping back in, the next section is called The Cult of the Black Cube and the Hive Mind.
Oh, perfect.
Quantum mechanics has shown that when a material's electrons are trapped together, they can settle into the exact same energy state and start to behave as one. This collective zombie-like state is what's known in physics as an electronic flat band. And scientists predict that when electrons are in this state, they can start to feel the quantum effects of the other electrons and act in coordination. quantum ways. Then exotic behavior such as superconductivity and unique forms of magnetism may emerge. You want me to continue with this next section since that one was short?
Yeah, if you want to, but I also first want to throw this in here, the whole idea of, okay, so maybe we can cover this again in a future episode because I want to make sure we can cover most of this article, but you start getting into the whole like 5G tower concept. And the whole 5G tower concept gets into the whole like synthetic ether concept. And if you start following like the patterns that these things give off, they start giving off these like Mandela type patterns. And the whole idea behind them is that you essentially could do this like mind control Havana syndrome type thing using these 5G towers. And if that is the case, it almost kind of seems like it's essentially using this concept, but mirroring it to a macro concept like we've talked about a million times in the occult before.
All right, guys, we got to take another break. We'll be right back. And now we're getting back to the bizarre. Okay, so moving on, we've got Saturn as Archon. Saturn's influence as an Archon, or cosmic planetary ruler, extends beyond its association with the Roman god to permeate various mythologies and religion, reflecting a shared essence despite differing forms and names. In diverse cultural and spiritual traditions, Saturn and its equivalents don't just rule over common themes such as time, structure, and limitations, but also death and decay. Whether identified as Kronos in Greek mythology, Shani, I guess?
Shani, yeah.
Yeah, Shani in Hinduism, Yama, or another deity in a different contextual cultural context, Saturn's influence persists as a universal archetype, suggesting a shared recognition of its role in shaping fundamental aspects of existence. This cross-cultural resonance underscores the archetypal power of Saturn, transcending specific mythological narratives to embody a broader cosmic significance in the collective human psyche. Did you have something you wanted to add?
Oh, I just want to throw in the fact that, again, the more we dive into the occult, the more you see this idea that everybody kind of talks about in the undertones, that all of these different entities, all these different beings from all these different religions, all these different cultures, they're all the same ideas, the same things, the same beings. They're just under different names. And the more you dive into the occult, again, the more that idea gets solidified. Because, again, the people that were writing all of this ancient mystery school stuff were the people that were writing the religions. So you got to keep that in mind when you're putting this stuff together, that, you know, we're all talking about the same things here. And this whole idea goes back beyond all of these different ideas of religions that everybody are fighting over.
We are experiencing technical issues. There is no cause for alarm. Please be at ease.
A few moments later.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yep. You all good to go?
You're coming through my headphones, so I don't know. Maybe I just need to back out and do it again. But all right, sorry about that.
All good. Do you, by chance, remember what the last comment you said was before?
I really don't. I got all discombobulated.
I might have it partially recorded, so I'll try to bring it up. But yeah, if you want, we can just hop right back in.
I'll just hop back in.
You know, I do that like little SpongeBob. Like a few moments later, I'll just throw that in there.
Okay. All right. You ready?
Yep.
In classical Roman mythology, Saturn is the god of agriculture, seeds, crops, and the harvest. Leader of the Titans, father and founder of civilizations, social order, and conformity. In Greek, he was called Kronos, meaning time, and was said to control the seasons and cycles and eventually, quote, lead to the birth of gods such as Zeus, who is called Jupiter by the Romans. Kronos also corresponded to the god Kronos, the leader of the youngest of the first generation of Titans, the divine descendants of Uranus, the sky, and Gaia, the earth. Kronos was usually depicted with a scythe or sickle, which was the instrument he used to castrate and depose Uranus. He castrated Uranus. His father was Uranus, representing the sky or the celestial realm in general. After overthrowing his father, he ruled during the mythological Golden Age until he was overthrown by his own son Zeus and imprisoned in Tartarus. that's kind of interesting.
And also to throw into the whole other perspective on this whole story, go back to that episode with Ari, and it gets explained in Electric Universe Theory as a totally different perspective of basically explaining it in a different way.
In Hindu astrology, Saturn is represented by Shani, a deity embodying justice and discipline. Saturn is also associated with Yama and both Vedic and even Buddhist schools found in Tibet, and Japan. Yama is the god of death and justice, responsible for the dispensation of law, karma, and the punishment of sinners in his abode. His name means restraint, control, moral discipline, and oath. Yama is in charge of directing the soul after death to the appropriate naraka, meaning purgatory, eventually leading it back through the womb towards Earth again. He is also the one who holds the 6 realms of desire of the, how is that word pronounced? Do you know that one?
Bhavakarika? Or chakra?
Sure.
Bhavra chakra.
We'll run with that. Of the Bhavra chakra in his grasp. These multifaceted associations of Saturn across these cultures illustrate its complex role, ranging from agricultural abundance to temporal cycles and cosmic order. Despite varied mythological narratives and distinct deities, the symbolic representation of Saturn remains consistent, an archetypal force shaping the cosmic order associated with time, limits, restrictions, karma, structure, and conservatism.
See, and this was something that I think we, again, had talked about on a previous episode, that I was saying that I believe that a lot of these gods aren't necessarily like people, but rather they're trying to put human characteristics on like forces or like ideas. So that's where it becomes this like really weird thing where it's like, oh, why can't you see these things? And it's like, because it's a force in a way, if you think about it. It's like it's literally trying to put human characteristics on like the will to fight, like the will to live. Like it's such like a weird thing to try to interpret, but it's like,
it would almost be like trying to put like the wind or fire or something like that in like a human form.
Exactly. Which I'm sure that, there's probably a bunch of different variations of that, like Hermes, for example. But yeah, it's like a prime example right there. But it's a weird thing to like interpret and really like think about. But it just comes back to that with a lot of the Saturn stuff, that again, it's particular entity and not a particular thing, not a particular being, but a force, a will, a type of thing that they're trying to put these human characteristics on through all these different religions. But
yeah, definitely.
Hopping into the Gnostic perspective. In ancient Gnostic traditions, rooted in beliefs of the different Gnostic sects, there are found in ancient texts composing the Nag Mahari library, a distinctive perspective emerges regarding the influence of a malevolent cosmic force linked to Saturn, the demiurge. Identified as the lesser, flawed deity responsible for creating the material universe, this force is often known in Gnostic traditions as Yaldabaoth. But anyways, another way to break this down is this whole idea of like the demiurge is basically, there's the Moad, which is the god of gods, like the god that exists above the demiurge. Like that's like the god of gods. The demiurge is the god that exists under that, but getting into this whole like universe or the whole like different reality perspective. I mean, we've talked about this on the show that like the reality that exists can see below it, but it can't see above it. So that whole idea kind of weirdly plays in with the demiurge. The demiurge thinks that he's the master of all reality because he can't see what's actually above him. And a lot of the Gnostic text actually believes that the Old Testament God, which seems a lot more angry and vengeful, is actually the demiurge, and that the New Testament God is actually the Moad, which is the god of gods, and it's actually two different gods that are portrayed in the Bible. But I've been waiting for an opportunity to throw that in. But yeah, demiurge and Moad is definitely an interesting concept when you dive into Gnosticism, and that's again something that I wanted to make sure that we're able to cover in a future episodes. So we'll definitely dive into some Gnostic stuff too at some point. But do you have any comments before we hop to the next thing?
No, man, I'm good.
Okay, so hopping on. The demiurge, the great architect. The ancient Gnostics warned of the demiurge and its diabolical and malevolent Saturnerian influence. Many of the different Gnostic traditions agree upon its identity being the deity of the Old Testament and the Jews, and it is called I'm not even going to try to pronounce that word. Yalabatha. meaning the progenitor of chaos, the progenitor of Sabbath, the title for God in the Old Testament, meaning Lord of Armies. Some groups associated Saturn with Sabbath itself. Other Gnostic traditions, like the Valaterians, believe the demiurge wasn't inherently evil, and it served an important role used by the Most High. And this is also something that can kind of be almost viewed in a different context with the whole idea of like Lucifer and God himself, depending on which Gnostic viewpoint you're coming from. But yeah, they also kind of play in the whole idea of like the Lucifer and the demiurge story also possibly playing into this. But the whole thing with Gnosticism that kind of gets a little bit weird is that there's not necessarily one strict teaching of Gnosticism. Gnosticism is kind of like different break-off variation perspectives of Christian perspectives. So it's like, you know, there can be 10 different Gnostic groups that have 10 totally different belief structures. Like, it's not like one single belief structure. Like, anything that's considered an alternative Christian or Jewish or anything that fits under the whole like monotheistic idea text that's alternative is considered a Gnostic text. So kind of a weird thing that it's not like its own specific school of thought. But the demiurge masquerades as God, but was but a shadow of the fallen emanciation of the feminine aspects of the divine, known as Sophia, wisdom, that was conceived without the consent of the spirit. There are many different versions of the story and have different details relating to the myths containing allegories that are beyond the scope of this article. Yet all of them encode secrets of creation and hold rich alchemical symbolism. Although the concept of the demiurge originates with earlier sources like Plato and wasn't inherently malevolent, the Gnostic worldview largely introduced the demiurge as a hostile false god lacking the true sparks of the divine and the spiritual essence of the Most High or true unincompatible God. Lalaboth serves as the chief archon of the material realm, considered a misguided deity tethered to Saturn's influence and the limitations of the material world. In Gnostic cosmology, the feminine divine figure Sophia plays a pivotal role. Sophia, emanating from the higher spiritual realm, emanating from the higher spiritual realms, tragically gives birth to Lalaboth without the divine spirit's consent, resulting in the creation of an imperfect cosmic force that is separate from the higher, since it is conceived without the consort of spirit called a synergy that some Gnostics associate with Christ as the logo. One Gnostic text found in the Nag Hammadi condenses discoveries in Egypt. The Hybisius, help me out, Orin.
Hypostasis, I guess.
Hypostasis.
Hypostasis.
The hypostasis. I'm going to go with that then. The hypostasis of the archons, the reality of the ruler, narrates how Yalabeth, although alongside the other archons, endeavors to shape the material universe patterned after seeing reflections from the divine spirit, after being reflected into the chaos of the waters below. Yet they lack the creative force of the spirit, since they are beings of matter and merely soul, and the resulting creation is imperfect. Adam and Eve were creations on a one level to be enslaved by the demiurge and the archons in Eden. Yet Sophia, or in some other mythos, Christ himself, although Sophia is really his synergy anyways, descends to liberate humanity, but in the form of the serpent. Then the feminine spiritual presence came in the form of a snake. The instructor and it taught them, saying, "What did he say to you? Was it from every tree in the garden shall you eat, but from the tree of recognizing evil and good, but not eat?" The woman of flesh said, "Not only did he say, 'Don't eat,' but don't touch it. From the day you eat from it, you will surely die." The snake, the instructor said, "It is not the case that you will surely die. For our jealousy," he said, "is to you. Rather, your eyes will open and you will be like me and recognize evil and good." And the feminine instructor power was taken over from the snake, and she left it behind merely a thing of the earth. Although the influence of the serpent, which is real hero in the Gnostic storyline, Gnosis was given to humanity in order to awaken the spark of the divine and the creation forces of the Holy Spirit that was given within. Yet the demiurge and the archons discovered what had happened and expelled the curse from them, demonizing the serpent and persecuting and persisting the feminine. repressing the feminine. Yeah, there it is. Moreover, they grew human beings into great distractions and into life of toil, so that they might be accompanied by worldly affairs and might not have the opportunity of being devoted to the Holy Spirit. Hypothesis of the Archons. Many traditional Gnostic teachings view the material world as a distortion and flawed reflection of the true spiritual realm. Many even rejecting it as an inherent corruption, and some seeking to spiritualize it through purification and bringing the divine into union with it through Christic alchemy. There it is. Gnosticism in general emphasizes spiritual liberation, urging followers to seek Gnostic knowledge, unveiling the true spiritual nature, enabling the soul to transcend material limitations and navigate a journey towards reunion with the higher spiritual realms, beyond the control of the malevolent demiurge and its realm of illusion, limitation, and spiritual entrapment. The Gnostic path aims to liberate the soul from constraints and ascend beyond the reaches of the archons to higher, purer spiritual dimensions. In Gnostic traditions, the demiurge exhibits both positive and maleficent aspects, just as Saturn does. The malevolent aspect of the demiurge and Saturn have been equated to the Christian concept of Satan. Yet all of these archons are similar, they are not quite the same, although they have the same Saturn principles of separation as their roots. And also, again, getting into a little bit more context of a different possible perspective on some of these secret mystery schools, because, of course, all the secret mystery schools kind of have this general idea, but they all have different viewpoints coming in. I think we've talked about it previously with the whole idea about flipping the whole perspective, where you view, the snake in the garden as like the positive thing, trying to free them of entrapment. Here's yet another aspect of that, which is honestly like an earlier variation, if you really think about it, of like the whole like Matrix concept of being trapped in a reality and then being aware of what's actually happening outside of your reality, which again is a hard question of, do you want to go the rest of your life, tasting the steak and knowing that it's false, or would you rather, live outside of that reality? I mean, that's the hard question, right?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question, isn't it?
Hold that thought. We'll be right back after this brief commercial break. And we are back to the show. Let's hop right in.
So jumping back in, the next section is Saturn equals Satan? ? A common interpretation, often found among Christian groups, is that Saturn is Satan. In various discussions, the phonetic similarities between the words Satan and Saturn has led some to assume a linguistic and conceptual link between the two. However, a closer examination reveals that this connection is exclusive to certain modern languages, particularly English. The word Satan originates from the Hebrew ha-Satan, meaning adversary or persecutor in a judicial context. On the other hand, Saturn finds its roots in Latin, a distinction that becomes more apparent when considering the original pronunciation and accents. Moreover, in Hebrew, the planet Saturn is referred to as some Hebrew word, a term closer to Shabbat, reinforcing its connection to the divine rest day and emphasizing a link to another Hebrew word. Delving deeper, however, the symbolic association of Saturn as the demiurge or the ruler or archon of separation aligns with the notion of satanic influence that can create a separation from the divine, a division and detachment from the sacred. On a microcosmic and internal personal level, this represents the ego structure that people identify with as themselves, disconnected from the true spark of the divine. This is why many Satanists openly say they don't worship a being called Satan, yet worship themselves and seek to glorify and indulge the self above everything else. Yet there is much more to Saturn than this. Saturn is not inherently evil, and there are many Saturnian influences that are extremely positive, protective, and even nurturing when considering the more feminine expressions of its power.
And this is like a concept too that gets into the whole idea about the like materialistic realm, that a lot of these other aspects of, moving up in the spiritual realm or going into higher dimensions, any of this stuff, it all gets into this whole idea about breaking away from the materialistic and breaking away from the physical. And when you start getting into this whole idea about like, these famous celebrities, for example, that clearly follow these ideas and philosophies, talking about like materialistic goods, like look how much more stuff I have than you, look how much greater I am than you, look at all these items that I have than you. Like they're essentially trapping people into this whole idea of the materialistic realm, which is essentially going against the whole idea that everybody keeps hearing, like elevate your frequency, elevate your vibration. The opposite of that is to become more materialistic and physical. So you have this constant back and forth of, this battle in the world of people saying to elevate yourself and break away from the material, while you have the rest of society, all these corporations, the media, everything else just telling you what to consume, buy, trap. Essentially debt slaves. It's forever. It's the black cube concept. But yeah, not to go off on another rant, but
no problem. You want me to read the next section?
Yeah, if you want to. I'm just trying to bank up our rant so that we have that, we have that out plan at the end. Once we get to that full hour of rants, we're out. We're done.
Hey, we might knock it out this episode at the rate we're going.
Yeah, well, I could take this whole episode as a rant. We'll just keep replaying it on the feed, man.
All right. So the next section is Saturnian hierarchy, positives and negative aspects. The occult understanding of Saturn involves a hierarchical structure of power, principalities, intelligences, spirits, archangels, angelic beings, and demonic influences, each playing a role in shaping and governing different aspects of the cosmic order and the human experience. Some of these have positive manifestations and expression, while some have more negative and even extremely dark expressions. To thoroughly understand the nature of Saturn and the more dark expressions of its influence, such as the ruling forces of the cult of the Black Cube, it's useful to understand the hierarchy of celestial beings Saturn governs. At the highest level, Saturn is associated with the celestial intelligences, archangels and angels who govern the broader principles linked to this planetary force. These archangels are seen as beings of immense wisdom and cosmic order, overseeing the more abstract aspects of Saturnian influence. Beneath the archangel level, there are angelic entities associated with specific aspects of Saturn's influence, such as time, discipline, or the karmic cycle. These angels are believed to act as intermediaries between the higher cosmic forces and the more tangible experiences of individuals. On the lower side of the expression, there are extremely hostile and malevolent forces of archonic and demonic influences related to Saturn. These entities are often associated with the darker aspects of the Saturnian force, representing death, limitations, suffering, and constant challenges. They are believed to thrive on discord, obstacles, and negative energies, embodying the shadow side of the Saturnian archetype. This is where the real danger of Saturn as a great malefic lies. This expression is what drives the more malevolent and disturbing aspects of the Saturn death cult.
The Saturn glyph. The planetary glyph and the symbol for Saturn is usually associated with a scythe, but traditionally was a cross above the lunar crescent. The planetary glyph for Saturn, although simple at first glance, holds rich symbolism that illustrates that many different ways that Saturn influence can manifest. It features a cross over the moon placed over the crescent. Actually, just for the sake of trying to save time, because I know that we're starting to run a little bit low on time, I want to hop into some of the more important aspects of this article. So we're going to jump forward a little bit here to the religious roots of Saturn. The association of Saturn with organized religion can be traced back to the foundational principles and structures associated with many spiritual traditions. The roots of numerous religions often lie in authentic divine connections or peak experiences that individuals seek to replicate. In the process of establishing organized religion, devotees create structures, orders, dogmas, and doctrines to codify and replicate these sacred patterns. This inclination to establish a fixed framework, a Saturnarian influence, is prevalent in various religious systems. Religion as a whole operates under the influence of Saturn by emphasizing a separation principle and creates division towards other types of spiritual traditions, even ones that are quite similar in essence. The Saturnerian influence also manifests through fixation on external elements such as dogmas and rituals, often devoid of the direct mythological connection to the divine. In some instances, the inner, more mythological pursuit, which has even the original impetus for why the religion was created in the first place, is ignored, denied, or even repressed and severely prosecuted. The Latin root of the word religion, relegate, means to bind or to tie, and originally reflects the concept that religion serves to bind or connect individuals to a higher power, belief system, or moral values, or a commensual identity, creating a connection between individuals and something greater. From spiritual connection to Saturn worship. Yet some religions become forms of Saturn worship to disguise what the pervasive influence of Saturn shaping religion structure and practices start to become the central focus point. This influence extends beyond the Western traditions, as Eastern religions and even some indigenous and Native American traditions can exhibit Saturnerian characteristics, which they become overly fixated on rigid rituals, dogmas, and rules of the outer forms, devoid of the empty of the real living connections and the spirit. The divination from original mythological and shamanistic expressions as seen in the Western faiths, as well as Eastern ones, such as the state-sponsored religious Taoism, illustrates how the Saturnerian influence can distort the essence of spiritual traditions over time. So when people use the term religion, they're referring to a set of beliefs, practices, and values that create a binding connection between individuals and their mental interpretation of the sacred or divine, which by its very limitation is not the divine, which results is often binding themselves in doctrine, dogmas, external rites, and forms. Once this happens and no real connection exists, it becomes a form of Saturn worship. And this was something that I was mentioning a bit earlier that I wanted to make sure that we definitely got to. So not to jump too far ahead, but I figured that this was some of the important information. So
yeah, no, that's definitely interesting. This next section sounds kind of interesting too, about the Abrahamic faiths as Saturn cults. You want me to read that section?
Yeah. You want me to read it? You want me to hop into it? Totally up to you, man.
I mean, I can give you a break. You just read quite a bit there.
Yeah. If you want to hop into the Abrahamic stuff, yeah, have at it, man.
All right. So this section goes, the most obvious and extremely Saturnian religions are the Abrahamic faiths, which refer to the fact that all of them trace their origin to the Abraham. Never heard him referred to as the Abraham.
The Abraham.
Yeah. And initially started through a blood sacrifice ritual. That's interesting. To make a covenant to secure lands and heirs. The scene would look quite ominous to modern day observers. 5 bloody animal carcasses on the ground, 3 of them split in half, with the halves separated a short distance from each other. The arrangement of divided animal carcasses was the setup for making a type of blood covenant, or a contract, a binding agreement between 2 parties, in this case associated with Saturn. It is written in Genesis 15 that after the sun had set and darkness had fallen, Yahweh, I think is how that would be pronounced, appeared in the form of a smoking fire pot and flaming torch that passed between the pieces. While Abraham had fallen into a deep sleep, and a thick and dreadful darkness came over him. And that's Genesis 15, verse 12. This dark Saturnian imagery apparently confirms the covenant that binds Abraham to the promise of heirs and land. This specific blood covenant, is known as the Abrahamic covenant. The Mosaic covenant was also a blood covenant, in that it required blood to be sprinkled on the tabernacle, the scroll, and all the people. And that's alluded to in Hebrews chapter 9, verses 19 through 21.
Just to throw in here too, by the way.
Yeah, go ahead, man.
Abraham was the one that was asked to sacrifice his son. And at the very last moment, God says, I just want to see if you do it, kind of a thing. You don't actually have to sacrifice your son. So if you take in that context about the whole thing about Saturn devouring his children, kind of a weird context with that part of the story. Just wanted to throw that idea in there.
Yeah, for sure. And there's only a little bit more in this section. It says, in fact, the law requires that nearly everything be cleansed with blood, and without the shedding of blood, there is no forgiveness. And that is in Hebrews 9:22. In the Mosaic covenant, The blood of animals served as a covering or atonement for the sins of the people. The animal's life was given in place of the sinner's life.
Yet almost everyone, including modern Christians, overlook the fact that this is all really just blood magic. Although there are many internal and esoteric meanings found in the Torah and the Old Testament in general, much of the mythology and the details of what was written, scholars question. Scholars agree that the Torah was written much later, during the time of the Babylonian exile, and most likely was largely corrupted or perverted or even biased from the Babylonian influence of the Israelites. Many scholars even suggest that Abraham myth and the Abrahamic covenant was made up as a propaganda to influence the Babylonians to let them return to Canaan, as they had an ancestral claim to the land through their progenitor. Help me out, Orin. Progenitors.
Yeah, I think it's progenitor. Yeah.
Through their progenitors. And let's see, where can we hop down here? So, do you want to actually? Yeah, this would be a good one to hop into right here.
Okay.
The three monotheistic religions led to Saturn. Judicial Judaism. Judaism, long associated with not just these major covenants and oaths, but excessive commandments and Mosaic laws, being ruled by the court and judges, the Sanhedrin and later Philistinians and rabbis, is a good example of the extreme Saturnerian religion. To highlight even more Saturn symbolism, let's explore some major themes. The Exodus. The Jews tie much of their origin story to the Exodus out of Egypt, and much of their following history includes even more slavery, suffering, and persecution, all themes ruled by Saturn. The Lord of Death and Karma seems to have kept perpetuating these same themes repeatedly throughout their history to the current day. The Sabbath, as we were kind of mentioning a little bit earlier, means Saturn in Hebrew and is connected to the word Shabbat. In Hebrew, the word is Shabbat. Saturn rules over Saturday, which is their day to not observe the Sabbath, meant death. The Torah, Old Testament / Laws of Moses, says that that on the seventh day there should be a feast for Yahweh, Jehovah, and that it should be a sign on the hand and reminder on the forehand of what he has done for the Jewish people during the Exodus story of the escape from Egypt. Year after year, Exodus 13:6 through 10. It is one of the 10 commandments, Exodus 20-8, and it says that those who work on the Sabbath must be put to death according to Exodus 31:14 through 15. Saturnerian covenants and binding to the law. Besides the aforementioned blood covenants, there are more rituals like circumcision, another Saturnerian blood ritual that originally had an inner symbolic meaning, and the binding of the Tephirin, which was observed examples of Saturnerian practices and rites that continue to this modern day. And for anybody that may not be familiar with that, that's that weird thing that you see with Jewish people where they like wrap their arms in like black leather. I believe that they also do that, I think near funerals too, if I'm not mistaken, right?
I'm not sure about that, honestly.
But do you want me to hop into this next section or you want to hop into this one? Goat sacrifice and goat demons.
You want to read this section then?
Yeah, I can do this one.
You want to go through it rather? I mean, I'll read it, but you want to cover this one?
Yeah, I want to make sure we cover this one. I want to make sure we at least cover these aspects of religion. And then after that, we'll kind of nip it in the butt and maybe at some point we might touch it again. But yeah, I want to make sure we at least were able to cover the religious aspect of this stuff. So,
all right, sounds good. I'll jump into this one. Sit tight, guys. We got to pay some bills. And now back to the show. So goat sacrifice and goat demons. Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, consisted of offering a goat sacrifice, one goat to Yahweh, the other to Azazel, associated with the fallen angel in the book of Enoch. Through a magical transference of energy, the other goat absorbed and took upon itself all the sins of Israel in a scapegoat ritual that was sent off to Azazel in the desolate wilderness. Paying off their sins or debts to the Lord of Karma is obviously Saturnian, and goats themselves are associated with Saturn and the sign it rules, Capricorn. Although not common knowledge, this practice actually originated from ancient Babylonian magical rituals. In researching canonical Udug Hul incantations, I came across earlier references to various types of scapegoat rituals where sin, illness, or even demons were transferred to different goats and offered to the ancient Mesopotamian deity Shamash to rid the individual being afflicted. So obviously, this type of practice may not have been an original part of the ancient Israelite religion to begin with, and only came after their exile into Babylon.
And let's see, we're going to skip forward a little bit here. Right here. The Black Cube cult of Christianity. The same Saturnarian principles from the other Abrahamic faiths now have corrupted all of the modern Christianity, which all were born out of Catholic churches as their progenitors, especially since they were destroying all surviving Gnostic traditions and even their texts, persecuting them throughout the entire world after they came into power and obliterating any and all forms of the original mythical and internal forms of Christianity. The Saturnarian principles can quite obviously be illustrated by the majority of mainstream Christianity fixating on Jesus ideology. Idols as not just internal forms, but also mental constructs are prevalent and have been warned about even back in the times of the original mythical connections of the ancient sages and prophets of the Old Testament. Worshipping the cross or the man known as Jesus is just another form of idolatry and Saturn worship. Yet, although the mythical and original Gnostic Christians were attempting to be blocked out of history and destroyed by the death cult of Saturn masquerading as the Christian church, the Nag Hammadi texts were discovered, and there are a few of us true to the original current and that remain today. The modern cult of the Black Cube. The negative expressions of Saturn influence can be found in modern manifestations of all aspects of society, and overall is what many refer to as the cult of the Black Cube. This does not just refer to the political and judicial systems, but also the educational and even financial systems that rule this world. BlackRock is one of the such financial firms that many consider to even run the world. BlackRock Inc. is a global asset management, risk migration, and advising firm that works with both retail and corporate clients. It is also using manager and other people's money with aspects worth $6.3 trillion US under its care. It holds public debts in the form of bonds, which many are aware of by now representing the Saturnarian enslavement of the soul and humanity under the never-ending debt loop of fiat currency. And just to throw in more with this idea, BlackRock, if anybody is familiar or not familiar with them, when all of this stuff was going on with COVID, they were the ones that were buying up all of this property. And when the whole idea about you guys will own nothing and be happy about it was going on, BlackRock was one of the main ones that was buying up every bit of houses that they possibly could under different names, like Open Door, for example, if anybody is familiar with that place, and essentially turning all of these places that people were buying as homes into now rent fixed homes. So the whole idea, again, of constantly having people trapped as debt slaves while also using the symbolism of BlackRock or like this black box as their symbol for their company itself. So it's like super weird that even within like modern day financial firms, you still see this like symbology of this black cube concept, which makes it all that much more mysterious.
Yeah, there's a lot of weird stuff with BlackRock that touches a lot of different conspiracies. I'm going to get the details of this wrong, so y'all don't come at me, but like one of the recent shootings or assassinations or something like that we had, like the shooter was like in a BlackRock commercial or some shit like that. And I think there's some stuff too with like the North Carolina hurricane that happened a couple years ago with like, I don't remember the exact connections, but you know, we've speculated that's like a whole land grab type situation.
Same with Maui.
And excuse me?
Same with Maui too.
Yeah. I'm not sure if there's like a direct BlackRock connection with Maui, but I think, you know, there's these like quartz and mineral deposits and whatnot, like in the North Carolina mountains that, you know, it's been theorized that the powers that be wanted to seize. And I think like BlackRock was involved in that. So just a lot to unpack there all the way around.
Just to throw in some more weird symbolism with BlackRock. BlackRock has grown from nothing to its current position in less than 30 years. Yet it is a global company that has 70 offices in many different countries. Interestingly, the ancient judges known as the Sanhari were composed of 70 judges under Moses as well. So also something weird with another symbolism of this black cube structure and 70 judges. It's also interesting to note that the only illusionary to Yahweh getting angry and aggressive is when he confronts the money changers in the Temple of Jerusalem. As we all remember that whole thing with like the Jesus story about him flipping tables and everything. If anybody hasn't heard that part, that's part of the continuation of that. As we now shift into the age of Aquarius, we see the rise of information age and an exponential boom in the development of technology. Aquarius, traditionally ruled by Saturn, is what governs scientific progression and advancement in technology. The cult of the cube started to shift its influence from dominating world religions to controlling the matrix by controlling the power that technology has over the mind. By the 20th century, the black cube cult started to dictate its influence through the familiar everyday black boxes of television sets, even since the advent of television and the successful campaign of propaganda during World War II. Manipulating the masses through the enclave of entertainment, advertising industry, through discrete subconscious conditioning to become big money businesses. Founder of the Church of Satan, Anton LaVey, famously promoted and boasted about the television becoming the new god of the masses in the early 1960s to usher in their agendas. And again, just to continue on with this whole idea about being entrapped in something that is entrapping your mind, what is the TV itself? It's literally a big black cube or a big black box.
Yeah.
And yet, in previous centuries, the church was the great controller, dictating morale. Oh, never mind. That's already double reading over that, talking about TV. Yet, as technology has progressed, the old television boxes has now been converted into smaller black boxes. Now, screens and smartphones act as a medium for the cult of the black cube's influence. You can even, or now with the recent developments of AI in the beginning of transhumanism, the merging of technology with humans, we see even more sinister potential descend into virtual matrix reality. You can even bind the black cube directly into your own head now to suck your own soul deeper into the matrix and further descend out of consciousness. Metaverse and blockchaining technology are now set to become major resulting influences in the cult of Saturn as the new age of Aquarius progresses. And again, people want to say whatever they want to say about it, but the symbolism is what it's all about. And why is it that, again, all this technology, you have Metaverse, which gets into the whole idea of Metatron, which gets into the whole idea of this Metatron's black cube, or Metatron's cube, and then even going into the whole thing with like VR being like this black box that you wear on your face. It's like the symbolism is what it's all about. And it's like, once you see it, it's kind of hard to like not see it, that all of these different aspects that go into this whole idea of mind control are constantly using this cube type structure. But again, going back into what we were even mentioning earlier, these straight line cubes are already something that's programmed into your mind to already make you think of structure, rules. Like it's so weird, like how entwined this is into the human psyche without us realizing it.
Yeah, for sure.
So what's the way out of the box? Escape the matrix, ascend the Saturn program, purge the demiurge within. On the individual level, rise above the modern trappings of the black cube cult by escaping the matrix, spending less time on social media, fixating on technology, and free yourself from religious and political constructs. Revoke any oaths, covenants, and binding agreements to groups, organizations, and institutes, and free any identification with major political and religious groups. Affiliation with political, religious, or social groups can have the effect of cubic entrapment as you become under the influence of egregores of the hive mind. Yet, even if you consider yourself a free thinker, independent individual, everyone has Saturnerian characteristics and qualities. Saturn is an archetype within you. It doesn't just relate to your physical form and body or just your ego structure as very individual itself. Saturn is an archetype within you. It doesn't just relate to your physical form and body or just your ego structure and very identity itself, but any of its association also applies as well. Where do you find yourself to be exerting controlling tendencies in life? What kind of limitations and restrictions do you impose on yourself and others? Where are you extremely fixed and rigid? What kind of religious or even intellectual ideas and concepts do you hold? What kind of dogmas do you subscribe to? Which of these mental constructs may be blocking you from the greater spiritual connection and wisdom? Do you focus more on Saturnian trappings like physical or financial stability, or do you allow yourself free time to be more present and spontaneous, opening up to exploring creativity or other actions that inspire awe or spiritual connections? All right, guys, this is our last break, so hold on tight.
And now back to the show.
And for the most part, I feel like we've kind of covered this concept as much as we can for this episode, I feel. I mean, you can definitely dive a lot farther into the occult symbolism behind the black cube, but honestly, what I was trying to do with this episode was trying to portray what the philosophy behind the black cube is, because you see the symbolism everywhere. You hear about the cult of the black cube all the time, but once you actually understand that it's basically praying to the entrapment structure, a lot more things start to make sense. And again, there's a lot more symbolism hidden within that, but I feel like that's the main focus for most of it. It's the control structure and, paying respect and homage to the control structure itself.
Yeah, I mean, I think it makes a lot of sense when you consider that there's a lot of ideas that the powers that be and the Illuminati, or whatever you want to call it, worship these Saturnian power structures and these black cubes and, the death cult of Saturn and all that. And, those are kind of the institutions and the people and the framework, if you will, that, keeps us going to our 9-to-5 jobs and keeps us not asking questions and keeps us kind of on this rat race and not looking into more philosophical and esoteric ideas. So, yeah, I mean, I think all this makes a lot of sense on a lot of levels. I think it's really interesting to dive into. And I think like the occult connections, like it's easy to look at this stuff. Oh, this is, this Roman thing or this Greek thing and kind of gloss over it. But when we start talking about like BlackRock and things like that are like very much current events and very much shaping our world and our day-to-day life, I think that just adds this whole new spin to this stuff that's really interesting. Not necessarily fun to talk about, but I mean, it's definitely interesting.
I mean, I think it's important because, again, a lot of people have all of these different concepts that are just kind of shrouded in darkness. Like, again, you talk about the occult and you instantly think of people like worshiping demons and summoning demons and everything like that. But what I've been trying to do lately, and hopefully it's kind of getting across, is that most of the stuff that these people are diving into is philosophy. And I feel like half the battle is understanding their philosophy, because once you understand their philosophy, you can't necessarily be trapped in it. So on a lighter note, what I'm trying to do here for everybody isn't trying to bring like doom and gloom to anybody diving into all these occult concepts, but I'm trying to shine some light on these concepts so that at least you know what your enemy is working to use against you. It's kind of like, if you have the opportunity to look at the opponent's playbook here and there, you're definitely going to take that opportunity to at least know what's coming at you. So I know a lot of listeners maybe think it's kind of strange that we're diving into this stuff lately, but as you were kind of mentioning, there's a lot of weird stuff going on in the world. A lot of these controlling powers are very into this symbolism. So as a podcaster, I feel like one of the best things that I can do right now for you guys is to at least help you guys at least try to understand some of the stuff that they're throwing at you. Like, I know that you're not necessarily going to get ahead of it, but at least take away some of like the darkness and the mystery behind these concepts that they're throwing. Like, next time you guys hear Saturn and the black cube, you're not going to think about this like demon in space that's going to fucking eat you, but instead you'll just think about it's the control structure that they're trapping you in. It's not a happy thing to talk about, but it also does take away some of the darkness to these concepts.
Yeah, and in some weird, fucked up, backwards ass way, it kind of also makes all the chaos of the world make more sense when you can look at things and be like, oh, well, yeah, this is fucked up, but it's fucked up on purpose because of this. So I mean, it doesn't, like you said, it doesn't fix anything. We're all powerless to fix these power structures and the powers that be. But I mean, I think just a little bit of knowledge and being able to recognize some of this stuff goes a long way. And everything might not be perfect, but it's going to be okay.
Hey man, sometimes if you can at least see the outside through your jail cell window, it just makes it a little bit more peaceful, right?
Well said.
You may not be able to escape all of these systems, but hopefully at least there's a couple that you can step outside of, or at least be aware of the system so you don't feel so confined by it. Because it's like, if you at least
an hour a day on your conjugal visit or whatever, anyway.
Yeah, exactly. At least if you know the structure, at least you can kind of work around the structure a little bit, right?
There you go. Well, Shane, thank you so much for bringing this article to the table tonight. I feel like, I've learned a lot. I think it was really interesting. And like we said, I think this is going to hit on a lot of things that we talk about in the future and things that we've also talked about on the show before.
Just to throw it into, just to throw it into, of course, like I was mentioning, I want to be able to dive into Gnosticism on a further episode. So we got a little bit of a taste in here, but we're definitely going to be diving into the Demiurge and the Moad a little bit more into a future episode, as I was mentioning. And also, if anybody is interested in checking out this article for themselves, because I know we skipped over a lot, and also there's a lot of pictures, because I know not everybody wanted to go to YouTube and watch the video. Some people just like listening on audio. The link will be included down in the show description, so you guys can find it quick and easy, and you guys can check it out for yourselves. And if you guys have any interesting thoughts on anything that we covered today, or anything else pertaining to this article, or if there's any other weird philosophical occult concepts that you guys would like us to dive into, we would absolutely love to hear it, and we are always open to suggestions.
Absolutely. And if you guys are interested in supporting the show and all the hard work that goes on behind the scenes, Shane, what can they do?
First and foremost, if you guys feel like it, you guys can go and check out our Patreon. We have one tier available over there now, made it quick and easy for everybody because nobody likes having more subscriptions than they need. $2.50 a month, which is less than a can of soda. Not too bad. And with that, of course, you guys can support all of our antics and bullshit that's going on behind the scenes, of course. And there's a 7-day free trial available if you guys want to see what it's all about. And if you guys like it, hopefully you guys will stick around.
And you guys can also check out the Bizarre Reality Media merch store with t-shirts starting at the oddly specific price of just $15.68 plus shipping. Wow.
And I know that times are tough out there, but if you guys would like to support the show in some other ways, one of the best ways that you guys can do that is by leaving a review anywhere that you guys happen to listen to podcasts. And Orin, what's the typical rule for that?
1 and 5 stars only.
And with that, of course, you will either get our love and appreciation, or you will get ridiculed, but that's completely up to you on how you guys want to play it.
And you can also share the show with your friends and family or anyone that you think would like the show, or share it with your enemies if you think they wouldn't like the show. We don't really give a shit. Just share it with whoever you want to.
Isn't it the coolest black cube you've ever seen?
Yeah, isn't this show the coolest black cube you've ever seen? Get trapped in our show forever. You guys are enslaved to our weird antics, and hopefully you guys at least enjoy it, because if you guys are going to be trapped in the cube, at least pretend to enjoy being trapped in the cube. But if you guys would like to keep up with the show in some other ways, you guys can always go and follow the show on Instagram and Facebook, and you guys can also catch live shows and video content on the Bizarre Reality Media TikTok, YouTube, and Rumble channels.
And if you guys have some free time, check out our friends and sponsors of the show and show them some love. We've got our buddies Rick and Hans with I Know Squatch for all your squatchy gear needs. And we got our buddy Joe with Quipdoteology for all your wearable quip dads.
And of course, if you guys have some additional time, don't forget to go and check out our awesome friends with affiliate links. We got Dimension Devices if you guys would like to pick up some paranormal investigating equipment. And we, of course, got Sticker Mule if you guys need any stickers, t-shirts, or anything like that for your podcast or church or local business, anything like that. And we, of course, have some additional discounts.
Or your Saturnian Death Cult.
Or your Saturnian Death Cult, even better.
Yeah.
That was not a perfect black cube to use for that one. You guys can put a little black cube on the bottom. It'd be perfect. You guys, it all writes itself within that. But there's some additional discounts and credits available for you guys if you guys might be interested in that, available down in the show description.
And as always, all the shit we've mentioned is in the link tree in the show description.
And as always, I got to tell you guys every single episode, because sometimes I